this video, we're going to be talking about how to add detail and sharpness to an image by using a couple of interesting tricks. For the first one, we'll be using the blur tool, which is sort of counterintuitive to add detail and sharpness, but we use the blur tool. The second one, we'll be using a different mask tool. So let's get into it. I've got a picture here which I've got a lot of layers on. I've done a lot of work on it. I'll do a couple of things here just for the heck of it. There's these two top layers here I'll group together. You don't have to do this part of the detail. I'm just going to organize this thing before I start. And dodge and burn. So I've got several things I've done to this particular image. I want to add some more grit, some more detail as a final step here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp the layer first. I'm going to take all these layers here and flatten them into a single image, but without getting rid of the layers. So that's Shift, Option, Command, E. Okay, creates a new layer that merges all the ones below. Okay, that's just so I have something to start with. I'm going to take that layer and I'm going to duplicate it, Command J. So I've got two of them. And then now that I've got those two together, I'm going to group those two layers into a group. And I'm going to call this group Detail. Okay, so that's going to be my detail group. I'm going to change the blend mode of the whole group to, right now it's pass through. I'm going to do it overlay. And I'm going to take these first two copies in that layer. I'm going to take this particular one here. I'm going to invert it by Command I. Invert it. And then I'm going to change the blend mode of this inverted layer to Vivid Light. I can't tell you the mechanics behind why this works, but it does. You'll notice right now if I turn this group off and on, there's no change to the image at all. The change comes about, and the magic comes about when I go to this layer that I just inverted here. And I go to Filter, Blur, and I'm going to do Surface Blur on it. Runs a surface blur on it. I'm going to use radius. The more radius you have here, the bigger the details. The smaller radius gives you smaller details. Threshold I would leave very low. I've got it at 13 here. It's going to do its thing here. It takes a little bit to do. Wait for it to finish, and then we can go on. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And when this finishes, we can zoom in and see what it did. Okay, so now it's added some detail. If I toggle this group, let's close the group, this detail group. If I toggle it on and off, watch the image. It's subtle detail. Okay, if we zoom in on a particular part of the image, so we can see what it did. Toggle it on and off. So it's on right now. Toggle it off. Okay, this is the before. You can see the detail, say in the porcelain here. This is the before. There's the after. Just pops the detail a little bit. And of course, you can make it more intense if you want to. But the whole point is to give the image some nice pop. Before, after. Okay, you can see the wood on this box down here. This is before. This is after. Well, I hope you found that interesting. Now the second method uses a high-pass filter to sharpen an image. You can do it subtly to sharpen it, or using it more aggressively to add more grit and detail to the image. So let's get started. Okay, I've turned off the detail I did before using the blur tool. So I've turned it off. That detail is going to be turned off, and we'll go on without that. We'll add detail to it using something else. I'll go to the very top of the image and stamp the image again. Shift, Option. Now if you're using a PC, that'd be Shift, Alt, Command, E. So I got my stamp layer here. I'm going to use this using this stamp layer now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the uh, the the blend mode to overlay. Okay, I'm going to go to filter, high pass. Okay, and using filter high pass, if I can run this the pixels up and down, you can, if you watch the image, you can see the detail pop. So this will be low, and this will be high as soon as it gets there. Okay, so with a high pass filter, you can control the amount of detail in an image too. You can add more grid and pop to the image too. So that's one way of doing it. The thing you should probably do before you do some of this is convert this image that you're working on to a smart filter so that you can go back and redo it afterwards. But I didn't do that here in this case. So let's just accept that that bit there. The other thing you can do is, if you don't like what it's done to the image because it's made some of it darker here, you can add a mask to the image. Okay, I can invert the mask by doing Control I, or when I add the mask in the first place, let me take that mask off. Delete the mask. If I had hit down the Alt key or the Option key when I was doing the mask, it would have been a black mask. What the black mask now does is, using a white brush, here's brush, I select brush with B, and then I switch it over D to get default colors black and white, and then X to get the white on top. Now I'm painting with white. With opacity, I'm taking the opacity down a bit. Flow is pretty low. This way I can be more subtle with it and start coloring in the detail where I want it. Okay, just so you can see what I'm doing, I'll run the flow up and the opacity up, and that'll make it more obvious what I'm doing here. So I can paint the detail in where I want it, and leave it off where I don't want it. So I'm painting detail in where I want that grit to show up. So this allows you to put the detail, and you can do also the same thing with the previous tool I showed you, the blur filter. Using the blur filter, paint in the detail only where you want it. So now I'm getting some more detail in this image in certain areas. So you can see if I turn this on and off, you can see that the detail in those areas pops. Okay, that's another way of doing it, two alternatives.